I recently completed my first novel, which is actually a huge accomplishment for me because I've been trying to do just that pretty much since high school. I've written, I think at this point, half a dozen novels, all incomplete. I have this entire graveyard of incomplete novels from my past. And this is the first one I've actually finished. I completed it about a week ago. The final first draft was 121,000 words. But I am scaling back. I mean, I've already started the reconstructive second draft, and because I take copious notes, I this is my series Bible. The novel that I just finished is the first in a trilogy. Some people who have heard me talk about my novel before might be like, "Wait a minute, didn't you say it was a 4-book series?" Yeah, I did. I lied. Now it's a trilogy. It's a 3-book series, and because obviously I am not a person of my word and I am unreliable, it might not even be a trilogy. But at this point, honestly, it's a trilogy. At a past point, honestly, it was a 4-book series. I don't know what the future holds. Anyway, so this is the series Bible, and I just want to show you how long this book took me. The first time I started it, so I conceived of the manuscript idea in August of 2013. That's actually before my nonfiction book. So I'm the author of Holistic Tarot, for those who might be familiar with it. This is the first book that I published a year after Holistic Tarot, and this was published by North Atlantic Books, an amazing publisher of metaphysical texts. And this is The Tao of Craft, which came out in 2016. So those two books came out way before the novel, even though I started the novel in 2013. Holistic Tarot was launched in 2015. And it's just amazing to see the progress in 2014. I started off with 20,000 words. I logged my word count. I don't know if you can see. So it's kind of a diary of my progress every single day since 2013. And of course, I think the reason it took so long, obviously I wasn't working on this in a very aggressive, consistent way every single day. Since 2013, I stopped and started, restarted, redrafted. So what I was working on in 2013 and 2014, first of all, that was in first person. The sacred relic it was involved was a totally different relic than the one that it is now. Just so many differences, different characters, everything was different. And then I made some big changes in 2015. 2018 was when I really hunkered down and started a completely new draft of the idea. And then I started working from 2018 onward. And that's 2 years ago. Then I stopped in 2019. I had a couple of other projects.
And by that, I mean illustrating my own tarot deck in pen and ink, which, by the way, spoiler alert, is definitely related to the novel.
And then this year, I really made it a resolution in January to pick up where I left off. And that was about, I can actually tell you the exact number. It was 90,000 words. So I had 90,000 words when I started 2020, and I took that to the finish line, finished it at 120,000. Now I'm scaling back, doing the editing, like I said, so I've already cut out a lot. This took 7 years. This is a novel that has been seven years in the making. In terms of how this book was written, my style, I'm what they call a pantser or a discovery writer, which means it's foggy all across the road and I have my headlights on, so I can only see about 3 feet in front of me at any given point in time. I had no idea what the ending was. I didn't even know what the development of any of my characters would be when I was starting them. So I was going on the journey with them. They surprised me. I know when non-writers hear that, when non-writers hear writers talk about how they have no control over their characters, they don't know what's going to happen, the plot surprises them as well, they're going on the twists and turns as the first reader of their own novels. Non-writers are like, aren't you the one in control? What are you talking about? But it's really true. I don't know how else to explain it, but the characters did for me come to life and they were taking me on the journey. So I really didn't know where I was going with this novel. I think that's actually why it took 7 years. I feel like for my second book, I'm going to try my best to outline. I don't want to force myself to proceed in a style that's not my own. I know I'm a discovery writer. I really know that that's my strength. So I will try to work with that and not not force myself to outline, but I think maybe a little more organization going into book two is going to be very beneficial for me. I think book one, I made a couple of really newbie, neophyte, amateur errors in terms of drafting and writing, and that's probably why it took me 7 freaking years to finish this novel. While I was writing my novel, one of the things that really kept me going and encouraged, especially when I was just hanging by a thread before giving up, was actually AuthorTube and writers on YouTube who were sharing their journeys. And I mean, I can't convey just how inspirational and how helpful they were. So that's why I wanted to share this vlog, just in hopes of maybe paying it forward. I think the type of novel that I ended up writing that ended up becoming my first also surprised me. So genre is this artificial construct purely for marketing purposes, and yet at the same time, we tend as writers to think in terms of genre, even though I feel like the best writing comes from a place of not focusing on genre in the beginning and waiting till the end when you're hunkering down with marketing and querying, then you think about genre. I'm getting ahead of myself. So I really was interested in writing Asian American literary fiction right from the start. And so the first few incomplete novels that I worked on from my late teens through the early 20s, mid 20s even, were always within the quote unquote genre of Asian American literary fiction. And I was very much about writing literary fiction. Again, even though it's a really snooty idea that doesn't even have any sort of basis, but I did think in those terms because I was brainwashed by the community that I was part of, the circuits that I was running in, that there was a difference between genre fiction and literary fiction. So I really wanted to write literary fiction. And the first novel that I've completed is in a form, what we would consider genre fiction. It's epic fantasy. I don't think any fantasy writer decides, you know what, I don't care about my writing style or my voice or technique. I just don't think that that's a thing. I think every writer fundamentally cares about the craft, cares deeply about the craft, is really interested in the artistry of every single word. So I don't really always understand the distinction between genre fiction and literary fiction, but it is what it is. So, what is my first novel, the completed manuscript? What is it about? Good question. I don't know. I haven't quite hammered out how I want to pitch the novel yet, so there's that to work through at this point. In fact, that's the juncture point that I'm at. But half jokingly, I've been calling it Assassin's Creed meets Witches of East End with a nod to Dante's Inferno, if that gives you any sense of what it's about. It's an epic fantasy. It's also historically, like, I try to be as historically accurate as possible. I did copious amounts of research into history and culture and language to really try to get this right.
I drew this rough map of Europe, North Africa, and the Levant, or Middle East, in the 13th and 14th centuries, more to help me maintain a clear sense of the spaces and also journeys that I'm writing about, since I am talking about the Crusades. The period spans from the fall of Acre to the Black Death and recounts the conflicts between the Franks, the Mamluks, and the Mongols. On screen, highlighted in blue, you see the cities that will be covered in my novel.
I even visited the places that I'm writing about, and I visited the museums, and I wanted to talk to historians and sociologists in every one of the areas that I'm writing about in this novel to make sure that I got it right. So that's another reason I think it took 7 years to write, because I needed all 7 years to make sure, every piece of the puzzle fit perfectly. So for me, I didn't care a whole lot about genre. I was really just interested in writing the best story possible, honing my craft as well as possible, and producing something that was near and dear to my heart. We can see whether or not that is the right approach when we get to future vlogs and basically see the end result of this journey, right? So I can't tell you at this time whether or not that's the right approach or not. Maybe the right approach is to be more thoughtful of genre, and I will tell you that 15, 20 vlogs from now after I've learned the hard lesson. But at this early point, vlog number 1, I would say that the way I approached my first novel was really not to care about genre. I just wanted to tell the story that I wanted to tell. And that sounds so blah and generic and fluffy, but it's the truth. In terms of world building, because I did write an epic fantasy, establishing magical systems, funny. So first of all, I did not write down the rules of a magical system because I thought I didn't have to, because I was like, well, I'm not going to make up a magical system from scratch. For those who are somewhat familiar with my background, I'm an occultist, a practicing occultist, actively study the various forms of occult craft, have read Lord knows how many grimoires from how many different traditions and civilizations. So I felt like, well, it's already in my head. The magical system and the quote unquote rules of magic is in my head. As long as I just write what I know, I should be fine. It's not that simple. Even if you are writing what you know, fantasy is very different. It still does need to have a certain rigor to it that even an actual occult practice would not have. So I mean, in terms of reflecting, I should have followed the advice of many another fantasy writer and actually written out the rules of my magical system before starting. I did not do that. I assumed I knew better. I assumed, well, all I have to do is write what I know. No, it doesn't really work. I don't know how to explain it better. It just doesn't really work that way, even if you are a practicing witch or occultist or metaphysician. When you're writing fantasy fiction, there are a couple of guidelines you do still need to follow. Another reason why it took me so long to write book 1 is because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So where am I at now? Well, I finished most of the second drafting of the complete novel, and I am beginning to try to formulate a pitch, draft my query letter. I don't think you should submit the very first query letter you've ever written or finished writing. I think it's really important to draft and redraft your query letter. So it should be as important as the approach and rigor that you apply to writing your novel. So I have to think about how I want to do that, think about the agents that I want to query. So that's where I'm at now, and I hope to keep you updated with my writing vlogs. Thank you and have a great day.